Sergey Brin is a co-founder of Google who turned a research project called Backrub into a company that now earns over $300 billion in annual revenue. He went from immigrating to the United States from the Soviet Union at age 6 as a refugee with limited money to co-creating Google in a Stanford dorm room and building a personal net worth of $260 billion. Need motivation?
Watch your top 10 with Believe Nation.
If you've been here before, drop a hashtag Believe in the comments below so I can feature you here in a future video. And if you're new, welcome to Believe Nation, the only channel that helps you believe in yourself daily, one video at a time. Okay, let's kick it off with number 1. Be ambitious.
Are there things that you did right at the beginning when you were creating Google that you look back and you think that was really important that we did that right from the start of the company?
I think early on, well, Larry was always very ambitious. He still is. In fact, there's almost no plan you can suggest to him that he won't say, like, oh, that's not ambitious enough. You need, not just the solar system, the galaxy, So I think that's a little bit of sort of his passion. And so yeah, we did have fairly early on the very ambitious mission statement, to organize all the world's information and so forth. And I think that was a good kind of philosophy to start a company on. And also, we did start a fairly academic, minded company. I mean, we both came out of the PhD program. Like a lot of the startups at the time were kind of out of college. I just do think that sort of shifts how you think about things a little bit. And, there are many phenomenal companies, just to be clear, that have come out of college. But the investment in sort of foundational R&D and so forth, I do think was a part of the culture quite early on.
Well, number 2, trust your intuition.
You are one of the biggest proponents of moonshot discoveries on the planet. You also run one of the world's biggest companies. So how do you decide which problems to tackle?
There's really no magic secret to it. There's not like there's some formula which tells you if you're going to do this problem, then that problem, then the other problem, you'll magically achieve success. I mean, it comes down to some preference, some intuition, and mostly, truthfully, it comes down to luck. Mm-hmm. But if you never try, you will not succeed. And by trying in areas that you think might be fruitful, then eventually you are likely to end up with a success.
Rule number 3, enjoy life.
Looking at your life now, what is your definition of a good life? What does it mean to you beyond all these accomplishments? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. What is the definition of a good life? Well, I guess that's being able to enjoy your life, whatever you build. I'd like to have family, have one of my kiddos here, my girlfriend is here. I feel grateful to be able to spend quality time with them. I do feel quite grateful to be able to be intellectually challenged sort of at this stage. I actually retired like a month before COVID hit. And it was like the worst decision. I had this vision that I was going to sit in cafes and study physics, which was my passion at the time. Yeah, that didn't work because there were no more cafes. Yeah, I don't know. I was just kind of stewing and kind of felt myself spiraling, kind of not being sharp. And then I was like, I got to get back to the office, which at the time was closed. But after a number of months, we started to have some folks going to the office, and I started to do that occasionally, and then started spending more and more time on what later became called Gemini, which is super exciting. And to be able to have that technical, creative outlet, I think that's very rewarding, as opposed to if I'd stayed retired. I think that would have been a big mistake.
Number 4, take a shot.
Could you ever imagine what came out of your original entrepreneurial first steps?
No, I could not possibly have imagined. But and I don't know what your thinking was behind the forum, but I remember when I was really thinking deeply about this, and this was sort of a graduate student project at Stanford, and I talked to my advisor. I was like, should I really do this entrepreneurial thing? And it might not work out, and I could just finish my PhD. And he said, why not? Go for it. And then if it doesn't work out, you come back, you finish your PhD, which I'm still planning on doing. But anyway, there's like no big deal. Just give it a shot. And I think that mentality permeates Silicon Valley, and I think that's one of the strengths that there's really not much. It's not viewed so negatively to try something, even if it doesn't work out.
Also, if you want to take real action after this video, I made a free worksheet just for you. It covers the top lessons from today, gives you space to write your biggest takeaways, and helps you build a simple action plan. It's 100% free. Just click the link in the description to go grab it. I'll see you there. Rule number 5 is experiment.
I think we worked on the ideas behind Google for a number of years, starting probably like in '95, and kudos to Larry to really focusing on the link structure of the web. But it was at the time the web was the new thing, and everybody would do. It was so easy to create some new idea. I think my first money-making idea was this pizza ordering. It seemed crazy at the time that you could order food online. Nowadays, we take it for granted. And as a joke, I put a Coke ad at the top. I thought it was so funny there'd be internet ads. But obviously, turned out to be not that funny. Anyway, it failed quite profoundly because the way it worked is you'd put in your order to the website, and then, pizza places were not online, generally speaking, but I had this idea they had fax machines. So it would automatically send them a fax with the order. But then I realized they don't actually check their faxes very often, and it flopped from there. So that didn't particularly pan out. But it was, at the time, I guess all of us probably in the computer science department, understood how the internet worked pretty well, how, web servers worked. You could whip one of these out really quickly. So everybody was just trying stuff on the web. It was just a very creative period. Anyway, so Larry was focused on the link structure. I was working on data mining at the time. And we joined forces, and, soon enough, we found we had something that was pretty useful for search. But we spent a while just experimenting with it at Stanford and thinking to make an academic project or not. We tried to, license it to various internet companies. One time, we had pitched it to Excite, and Vinod Khosla, to his credit, thought, hey, this is great, you guys should buy this. But Excite wasn't very interested. But we had an email back and forth with Vinod, and we sent a note and said, okay, we'll license you the technology for $1.6 million. And we got a reply 15 minutes later saying, that's a lot of moolah, but okay. And we're excited to graduate students, that was a lot of money. And then our friend Scott, at the time there were 4 of us working on it. Scott and Alan were the other 2. They went off to start their own companies. Anyway, Scott comes in laughing hysterically, and it turns out he had faked the reply. Because back then you couldn't send an email from anybody. So yeah, that deal didn't come to pass, obviously. But eventually Larry and I just decided that, hey, to scale this up, it would be really good to get actual money. And eventually we found some angels, which was very easy. And my advisor, Jeff, because for me, I was leaving a PhD program. My parents were disappointed. But he was like, well, why don't you just give it a try? And if it doesn't work out, you come back. So I'm still on leave of absence, technically, might still come back. We'll see how it goes.
Rule number 6, silence the noise.
I think young people, in some ways, their life is much easier than, sort of my life might have been at that stage. Just, for, I think, all of us, having before, whatever, if we were traveling to Switzerland, it'd be a big stressful thing. How do you get in touch with people before mobile phones, arrange your travel, figure out how to exchange your currency? There are many things, we can whip our phones out and look up anything and figure out how to get somewhere. There are a lot of affordances that are such conveniences today that make it easy. But there's also a global stage that makes it hard, actually. Because if when I was in school and I was on the math team or whatever, I was just compared to other kids in the school, and I did quite well against them, and I found myself, I'm good at that, I'm good at that. I find younger folks today their measures of themselves are always, especially, the ambitious ones, are on this global stage. It's like, I have to be, number one in the world at this or that. And I'm like, that's a really tall order. And I think it can be discouraging in a way, because if, those folks say, I'm number 1,000 in the world at this game, which in my world would have been an enormous achievement, because that means like you were definitely the best in like your city and your state and whatnot. But it's hard, and I think there's a little bit of discouragement. So I would encourage young folks to take chances and pursue their dreams, and try to silence out kind of the voices that say, actually, there are like 1,000 startups trying to do whatever, self-riding bicycles or whatever it is they happen to be doing.
And I think the key is to have fun in your startup and not from the beginning on to think of the IPO, which may bring you $1 billion. That's keep. And that was certainly not your motivation to make it a success.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly had no dreams of such economic success. And I think you're exactly right. I think you should have fun and not be so weighed down by the weight of expectations. That I think sort of this global network, unfortunately, one of the downsides, I think it creates that weight.
Rule number 7, find your passion.
Eventually, I went on to join the PhD program in computer science at Stanford. And it was purely, the interest of what can you do with all of the world's information now that it's online. That interest spawned Google, and that was together with Larry Page, who's my co-founder and partner. I think as a kid, I always had a kind of scientific curiosity. I was always interested in mathematics, and I always enjoyed doing math problems. And in fact, my undergrad, I had a degree in both math and computer science. And I think eventually I was really inspired by computers because of the amazing power that they give you. I mean, today's PCs do 1 billion operations per second. I mean, it's almost inconceivable. And I think that was the most inspiring thing to me, how you could leverage that to actually produce something that was, that was useful beyond video games and things like that.
Rule number 8, find good partners.
I'm Sergey Brin. I'm from Google, and prior to that, I was a PhD student at Stanford. Larry and I first met when he came to visit during the PhD recruitment weekend, which was, he started a couple years after I did. And we became good friends when he actually agreed to join and came on board. And we experimented with a variety of things. We had some shared interests, and Larry had this crazy idea that he was going to download all the links on the web and then do something with them. It wasn't entirely clear what. We did find that there were great applications, and one of them was search, which eventually became Google.
Co-founders are super important for building a company, and you guys have doing great for 15 years. Have you sort of fundamentally disagreed on something at all over the last 15 years, and how did you resolve?
Where do I start? No.
I think if you
get to know somebody over a long period of time. We're working together for so long, and we're committed to doing that. You don't like get agitated about one little thing or the other. I don't know. We work it through, and also generally we've gotten to think remarkably alike, which scares some people around us, I guess.
Yeah, and the other thing, I mean, we know enough, I guess, that when we're disagreeing, I mean, you make a lot of calls that aren't obvious. So, I mean, if you're disagreeing, it's probably that it's not obvious what to do.
Number 9, overcome challenges.
One is on deploying a service that's going to serve millions of people. When we were at Stanford, we had 10,000 people using our service, or about 10,000 searches per day, I should say. And now we serve over 50 million searches per day. And that scaling of infrastructure, that's pretty challenging. On a more personal level, I think I'm now the president of Google, and we have about 170 people now. And I think managing people and being emotionally sensitive and all the skills you learn in terms of communication and keeping people motivated, I think that's been a challenge, and I've enjoyed learning that. But that's an important and a hard thing to learn.
And number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is fail quickly.
The other thing that we've really found over time at Google, watching at other companies, watching many of you, is the importance of the development cycle and how you really need to be able to churn quickly through things. And because, obviously you're going to have failures. You're going to have the wrong idea. But it's important to fail quickly.
Larry and Sergey almost got acquired. Can you tell us a little bit about this? And I always wonder how the world might be different if that had in fact happened.
We had developed this technology we called PageRank. Sadly, not BrinRank. But anyway, it probably would have sold better that way. But we had developed this technology that we found was useful for search. It by itself wasn't really a complete search engine. What we had kind of just search titles of web pages and ranked them quite well. But we showed it to a bunch of the existing search companies back then. Some of you might remember them, InfoSeek, Excite, Lycos. Probably the greatest interest came from Excite, and actually came from Vinod. You were the investor in Excite. And we spent a while talking to them, talking to you, Vinod.
Yeah.
You remember that. In the end, I don't think the management team there was quite as excited about it, no pun intended. But I remember there were 4 of us at the time, 4 grad students at Stanford. And I remember we fired off a note to Vinod. It was just like a little email. We said, we don't really want to sell, but okay, for $1.6 million, you got a deal. And a few minutes later, we got a reply and said, that's a lot of dough, but okay, we'll do it. I know, that's characteristic of Vinod, right? So then, 10 minutes later, Scott, one of the 4 of us, comes running in, laughing, huge grin on his face. He had faked the reply. And yeah, back then, the ethics around faking weren't quite the same. Anyway, so he had that big joke, and the deal obviously never came to fruition, and we went our own way to build search.
And congratulations, you're one video closer to who you're meant to be. Believe. For 10 more amazing rules from Larry Ellison, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
As we're now using technology, the technology that I worked on for most of my life, to make the quality of healthcare, dramatically improve the quality of healthcare.